The night my parents told me I was no longer part of the family still echoes in my mind like a wound that never healed. It happened in our living room, a place once filled with warmth and laughter, now cold and heavy with unspoken anger. My father's voice was sharp, trembling not from sadness but fury. "You brought shame to this family, Lena," he spat, his eyes burning through me. My mother stood beside him, arms folded tightly, refusing to meet my gaze. The silence between their words hurt more than the accusations themselves. "I didn't do anything wrong," I whispered, though my voice barely reached them. My father's fist slammed against the table, making the photo frames rattle. "You've done enough. From this moment on, you are not our daughter." The words struck harder than any blow. My knees felt weak. My mother flinched but said nothing, her eyes glistening with tears she refused to shed. I looked at my younger brother, Ethan, standing at the corner of the room, scared, confused, his lips trembling as if he wanted to defend me but couldn't. I walked to the door, my heart breaking with each step. My father didn't stop me. My mother didn't call my name. I left with only a suitcase and the unbearable weight of rejection. That night, I sat alone at a bus stop, my hands shaking as I tried to breathe through the ache in my chest. The stars blurred through my tears. In that silence, I realized something cruel and irreversible. I hadn't just lost my parents. I had lost my home, my belonging, and a part of myself I would never get back. The years that followed felt like living in a quiet shadow. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort, it consumes. I rented a small apartment on the edge of town, barely big enough for one person, but it was mine. The walls were thin, the nights were cold, yet it felt safer than the home I had been cast out from. Days turned into months. I found a steady job at a bookstore, peaceful, predictable, and filled with the scent of paper and ink. It was easier to lose myself among forgotten stories than face my own. Sometimes, when the shop was empty, I'd catch myself wondering if my parents ever missed me. The thought always ended the same way, with quiet tears and unanswered questions. Ethan, my younger brother, never called. I told myself he was busy, that our parents must have warned him to keep his distance. Still, I checked his social media every once in a while just to see him smiling. He looked happy, grown up, and in love with a woman named Grace. Seeing that made my heart ache, not with jealousy, but with longing for the family I once had. I celebrated birthdays alone, holidays with silence, and learned to live without the warmth of belonging. Yet somewhere inside, a tiny spark of hope refused to die. The hope that one day, someone in my family might remember that love isn't something you can erase. It was an ordinary Thursday evening when the past came knocking, not in words, but in the form of an envelope. I found it wedged between electricity bills and flyers, its cream paper and golden lettering so out of place that my hands froze before touching it. My name, Lena, was written in neat cursive, a handwriting I hadn't seen in years. My heart began to race. For a moment, I thought it might be from my parents, an apology, a letter, anything that meant I wasn't forgotten. But when I opened it, I saw a name I hadn't expected, Ethan. It was a wedding invitation. Ethan James and Grace Mitchell cordially invite you to celebrate their marriage. I reread the lines until they blurred. My throat tightened when I noticed a small handwritten note at the bottom. "I want you there, Lena. Please." I sank into a chair, the letter trembling in my hands. My first instinct was to say no. My parents would be there, the same people who had erased me from their lives. The thought of walking into that hall, of seeing their faces again, filled me with dread. But Ethan's words wouldn't leave me. He hadn't forgotten me. Despite everything, he wanted me to be part of his happiness. That night, I stared at the invitation under the dim light of my kitchen. Part of me wanted to protect the fragile peace I'd built. The other part, the one that still loved her brother, whispered softly, "Go." And for the first time in years, I listened. The day of the rehearsal dinner arrived faster than I expected. My palms were slick with sweat as I stood outside the elegant countryside venue, clutching my invitation like a shield. Laughter and soft music spilled out from the open doors, mingling with the faint scent of roses and wine. For a moment, I considered turning back. But then I saw him, Ethan, stepping out from the crowd with the same boyish grin I remembered. His eyes lit up when he saw me. "You came," he said, pulling me into a hug before I could even reply. For the first time in years, I felt a familiar warmth. That moment was short-lived. Behind him, my parents appeared, my mother in a shimmering silver dress, my father standing tall and proud. Their smiles faded the instant they saw me. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's hand froze midair, her expression a mix of shock and disapproval. The air thickened. Guests turned their heads, curious about the tension no one dared name. Ethan, still holding my arm, cleared his throat nervously. "Mom, Dad, you remember Lena?" My mother forced a brittle smile. "Of course." But her eyes were cold, like I was an unwelcome ghost. Then I met Grace, Ethan's fiancée, radiant, kind-eyed, and curious. She shook my hand warmly and said, "I've heard so much about you." Her voice carried genuine warmth, not pity. Throughout the evening, I stayed quiet, tucked in the corner of the celebration. My parents avoided me completely, pretending I wasn't there. Still, every now and then, Grace's gaze met mine, soft, questioning, as if she could already sense that beneath the silence, a painful story was waiting to be told. Dinner felt endless, a slow parade of smiles and laughter that didn't reach my corner of the table. My parents sat across from me, talking animatedly to relatives, but not once did they acknowledge my presence. If someone addressed me, my mother would immediately change the topic. My father would simply sip his wine, pretending not to hear. It was as if I were invisible, a ghost haunting a family that had already buried me. Ethan tried to bridge the silence, asking about my job and life, but his attempts were met with warning glances from our parents. I could see the guilt in his eyes. He was torn between love for his family and the truth he wasn't allowed to speak. Grace, on the other hand, noticed everything. She watched the tension carefully. The quick looks, the stiff smiles, the way my mother's fingers tightened around her glass whenever I spoke. Finally, she leaned closer and whispered softly, "Why do they treat you like this?" I forced a smile. "It's complicated," I said, "but don't worry about it." Her brow furrowed, unsatisfied with the answer. No one deserves to be treated like they don't exist. Her words hit deeper than she could have known. For the first time that evening, someone had seen me, not the silence, not the shame, but me. And though I said nothing more, something in her expression told me she wasn't going to let the question go unanswered. Grace was not the kind of person who could ignore injustice. I realized that the next morning when I found her alone in the garden, arranging flowers for the ceremony. The sunlight filtered through the trees, painting her in soft gold. She looked up as I approached, offering me a gentle smile. "I'm glad you came yesterday," she said. "Ethan's been wanting to see you for years." I returned the smile, though mine didn't quite reach my eyes. It meant a lot that he invited me. Grace hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask something personal?" I nodded, unsure where this was going. "What happened between you and your parents?" "I can tell there's more than just tension." Her voice was kind, not demanding. For a moment, I wanted to lie, to brush it off again, but the truth had been sitting in my chest for too long. When I was 19, I began slowly. My father's company was collapsing. He'd been hiding debts, falsifying numbers. I found out by accident. I tried to convince him to stop, but he wouldn't listen. So I did what I thought was right. Grace stayed silent, listening. I reported the fraud anonymously. The investigation came fast. My father wasn't arrested, but the business was exposed. He lost clients, reputation, everything he'd built. My parents found out it was me, and they never forgave me. They said I betrayed them, humiliated the family. My voice trembled. I only wanted to stop him from losing everything. But to them, I was the reason it all fell apart. Grace's eyes filled with sympathy and quiet anger. You tried to save them, and they turned you into the villain. I shrugged, blinking back tears. That's family, I guess. But Grace shook her head firmly. "No," she whispered. "That's not family. That's fear pretending to be love." And with that, I realized Grace wasn't just listening. She was beginning to understand. The wedding reception shimmered with golden lights, laughter, and clinking glasses. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Grace had been quiet all afternoon, her usual warmth replaced by a thoughtful, almost defiant calm. I should have known she wasn't the type to keep the truth hidden for long. When the speeches began, Ethan thanked everyone with tears in his eyes. Grace stood beside him, radiant and steady. But when it was her turn to speak, she didn't reach for her notes. She looked straight at my parents. "I want to thank the people who raised the man I love," she began, her voice steady, "and the woman who showed me what true strength looks like." The room fell silent. My parents exchanged uneasy glances. Grace continued, her tone soft but unyielding. "Some of you may not know this, but Ethan's sister, Lena, once made a choice that cost her everything, because she chose honesty over silence." My father stiffened. My mother's glass froze midway to her lips. Grace's words grew stronger. She protected her family from destruction. Yet instead of gratitude, she was cast out, blamed for saving them. "I don't think that's shameful. I think that's brave." Whispers rippled across the tables. My mother's face drained of color. My father stood abruptly, his voice sharp. "You had no right to bring this up here." Grace met his glare without flinching. "Maybe not, but I also have no right to pretend I don't know the truth." Everyone stared. I wanted to disappear to stop her, but at the same time, I felt something break open inside me. Ethan turned toward me, realization dawning in his eyes. "Lena, is that true?" he asked, his voice trembling. I nodded, tears spilling freely. For the first time in years, the truth wasn't a burden. It was a release. The silence that followed Grace's speech felt heavier than any sound. Every pair of eyes in the room shifted between my parents and me, the air crackling with disbelief. My father's jaw clenched, his pride trembling on the edge of rage. My mother looked like she might cry, but she forced the tears back, hiding behind her napkin as if shame could be wiped away. "You had no right." My father hissed again, this time to Grace. "This is a family matter." Grace took Ethan's hand and said quietly, "It became my family's matter the moment I became part of it." He said nothing, only stared at me, his expression soft and wounded, like he was seeing his sister for the first time in years. "Why didn't you tell me, Lena?" I swallowed hard. "Because I didn't want to make you choose." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he crossed the room and pulled me into a tight hug. The dam broke. Years of guilt, silence, and rejection melted into tears I couldn't hold back anymore. Guests whispered softly, unsure if they should applaud or stay quiet. My father turned away, his pride fractured. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for his arm, but he pulled away and stormed out. She followed him, glancing back at me only once, her eyes full of confusion, sorrow, and something that looked almost like regret. Grace wrapped an arm around me. "You didn't deserve any of that," she whispered. For the first time, I felt something shift, not just in the room, but in me. The truth had cost me my family once. But now, it had given me something better. People who chose to believe in me. Morning light crept softly through the curtains of my hotel room, painting the walls in shades of gold and gray. My head still ached from the night before, not from the noise or tears, but from the weight of everything that had finally come undone. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. For a moment, I didn't want to look, but when I finally reached for it, I saw a message from Mom. "We need time. Your father isn't ready to talk." Just 7 words, but they carried more emotion than any I'd heard from her in years. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something, a crack in the wall that had divided us for so long. Later that morning, Ethan and Grace came to see me before leaving for their honeymoon. Ethan hugged me tightly, longer than he ever had before. "I'm sorry for everything," he said, his voice thick. "You tried to protect us, and we let you face it alone." Grace smiled softly beside him. "You're part of our family, Lena. Always." Their words wrapped around me like sunlight after a storm, gentle, fragile, real. As I watched them leave hand in hand, I felt a strange calm settle inside me. I had lost one family, yes, but I had also found a new beginning, built not on secrets or conditions, but on truth, and that was enough. Months passed, and life slowly found its rhythm again. The chaos of the wedding faded into memory, replaced by quiet mornings and gentle reminders that healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small, steady steps. Ethan and Grace kept their promise. They visited often, called even more. Grace would send pictures of their new home, laughing about how Ethan couldn't cook to save his life. Every message, every moment of kindness, stitched another piece of me back together. One afternoon, I received a small envelope in the mail, this time from my mother. Inside was a simple note. We're sorry for how things ended. We just didn't know how to face it. Maybe we can start over someday. There were no grand apologies, no excuses, just the beginning of something fragile and uncertain. And somehow that was enough. I placed the letter in a box of memories I once thought I'd never want to open again. That evening, I sat by my window, watching the sun sink behind the city skyline. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger or grief, only peace. Family, I realized, isn't about blood or shared history. It's about the people who choose to stand beside you when the world turns away. I may have lost a family that raised me, but I gained something truer, the freedom to love, to forgive, and to finally belong to myself. As the last light faded, I whispered into quiet. They said I wasn't part of the family anymore. Maybe they were right. Because now, I've found one that actually loves me.